Good morning, guys. Today we will analyze the first 6 chapters that we have read in The Woman in White. Before doing so, let's recall important information of the Victorian era back in the 19th century. To begin with, this time was a landmark period in the history of the Great Britain. During this time, England became industrialized, a number of factories sprawled up, leading to vast improvements in the living as well as working standards of people. Besides that, railways were constructed, and apart from that, a lot of scientific inventions took place, like the telephone, the radio, and the steam engine, just to mention a few. It is important to highlight that during this time, poverty increased substantially. Housing became difficult, resulting in overcrowding and development of slums. Additionally, this era was also famous for the rising rate of child labor in mines and factories. Now, moving on to The Woman in White, the first aspect we need to remember is that it was written by Wilkie Collins and published in 1860. Collins wrote more than 60 short stories, at least 14 plays, and 100 of non-fiction pieces. This author, indeed, is considered to be the precursor to current crime and suspense mystery novels. The Woman in White allows us to reflect about the oppression of women, marriage and gender, class, industry and social place, plus the decadence of the civilization. During the 19th century, the idea of the new women was not yet to be performed. Bear in mind that this concept is the result of being against a system that denied women to have the rights to live in better conditions. Being a woman, back in that time, pretty much meant to be a slave within the house. Women were responsible of raising kids, organizing household, no way of getting higher education, and whose economic decisions were entirely made by their husbands once they got married. At this point, some of you may be saying, well, and if that was the case, then why to marry? Well, guys, remember that we are talking about the 19th century. Then, not to be married was socially criticized, since men were supposed to be born to take care of women. Collins was very critical indeed of marriage laws established in Britain. For example, he was against the law that applied to the children of unmarried parents. Furthermore, he censured the fact that women had little power to shape their lives to their liking. Through Laura and Marion, Collins analyzed how women were denied the chance of higher education and must content themselves with learning feminine subjects like painting and music. They couldn't freely choose their marital partners and had to comply with the wishes of their chauvinist fathers and uncles. Through his characters, Collins not only reveals himself towards the social system imposed that oppresses women, but also provided the reader with a critical view upon something that should have been done differently. The Woman in White is divided in chapters, and different narrators tells what's going on from his or her own experience. That is why some readers find it appealing and entertaining. The first narrator was Walter Harright, the drawing teacher who symbolizes the emerging middle class, and who fell in love with Laura Furley after having accepted a teaching position offered by his Italian friend Pesca. One night before he leaves the Limerick house, he met a mysterious woman dressed completely in white, and who had escaped from an asylum in which Sir Percival had previously imprisoned her. At Limerick House, he met Laura Furley and Marion Holcomb, half-sisters. Laura represents beauty and innocence, as well as lack of character, while Marion, who is described as an ugly woman, represents a strong character and deceiving attitude not to accept mistreatment. Collins introduces us another character in his book, Mr. Frederick Furley, a hypochondriac man who's very lonely. Making reference to the way the story develops, Walter fell in love with Laura and she fell in love with him as well. However, this is an impossible love, as Laura had promised her father before his death that she would marry Sir Percival Glythe. While these romantic feelings grow and grow, Laura receives an anonymous letter that warns her not to marry Percival. After investigating, Laura and Walter found out that Aunt Catherine, the woman in white, was who had sent the letter to Laura. In this story, there is an important character who symbolizes order, loyalty, honesty, and acting correctly. And this man is Fairly family's lawyer, Mr. Gilmore, who warns Laura of the economic disadvantages she will face once she marries Sir Percival. This agreement pinpoints two important characteristics of how women lived back in the 19th century. If Laura died childless, the property would go to a cousin, but the income from it would go to her husband during his lifetime. Besides that, if she died before her husband, he would receive a huge amount of money for his lifetime. Finally, Laura and Sir Percival get married and Marian lives with them. Coming from their honeymoon, Sir Percival and Laura return home with Count Fosco and his wife, Eleanor, Laura's aunt. Over the time, Percival Glyde tried to get Laura to sign some papers for him to access a large amount of money to pay some debts he had, but she refused to do so. In the process, Marian realizes how bad Sir Percival treats Laura and is not afraid of speaking their mind, emphasizing that there were laws to protect women. Well, guys, this is pretty much what we have read so far in The Woman in White. You definitely should spend some time finding out how this story ends, since this book leaves a clear message of how gender equality should be a must, and let us reflect on how much the women's situation has changed since the 19th century. Now, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Gender equality should be a must, and any literary piece that invites us to reflect on human nature is definitely worth being read. Thank you.